but they knew of Jesus and believed in Jesus as a Jewish prophet. And if you're familiar with Islam, you'll notice that Muhammad treats it the same way. He respects Jesus and the believers of the book, which would be, of course, the Bible, not only the Old Testament. I'm not sure how much Muhammad was familiar with the New Testament, but he definitely would have been familiar with Byzantine Christians at the time, because those were the ones that he was attacking, basically. Initially, I mean, it wasn't just Muhammad that led the surge of Islam in the 650s and so on. There were followers, and of course there's already breakaways between them, so you end up with the difference between the Sunnis and the Shia as a big split among Islam. Okay, but Plotinus, how is he connected? Remember, he's a follower of Plato, and as far as he's concerned, you can physically connect from the physical world to heaven, basically, right? And how do you do that? For Plotinus, through meditative practices. He's supposed to have accomplished this 4 times in his life, so he was able to meditate so well that he was one with the universe. I've got friends that have encouraged me to try dropping acid, and I'm like, just tell me what it's like. That's all right. I'm not going to try it. I had a top secret clearance, and I wouldn't have had that had I had done things in my youth that they did. That's just the way that works. And I've got a retirement now, and they don't. That's another big issue. But the idea, though, and by the way, in a serious, I joke about that. But if you read Michael Pollan, I spelled it right, and I can't remember the name of the books. First Michael Pollan, I spelled it wrong, book that I read was The Omnivore's Dilemma, which was the scariest book I ever read, by the way. So if you want to be scared to death, read that. That's way better than a Stephen King novel, as far as putting the fright, because this is our food. So where does your food come from? What are we eating? And from this book, I learned that I've been an experiment my entire life, thanks to high fructose corn sweetener, polysaturated fats, all these inventions, oleo and margarine, all these new foods that, by the way, aren't really food. and not only that, thanks to the fertilizers used on the fields and the changes in the grains that we eat, the energy that fed the plants that my parents ate were supplied with their energy from the sun. The energy that supplied the foods that I ate and still eat, and by the way, you probably eat, are powered by oil. Because the fertilizers, which enable them to grow the way they do, are fertilizers that come from oil products, petroleum products, and the carbon in those are different than the carbon that you get from the sun. So the carbon atoms in my body are different than the carbon atoms that my mom and dad had. And by the way, I'm putting that in a very simplified way. But my one friend, who's retired now, but Kim, who's biology professor here, then became a dean, and then became the provost before he retired, said, well, yeah, you're basically that. But yeah, obviously it's much more complex. Yes?
I read an article recently about the heights of like people's, like throughout civilization, and compared from Americans to like Europeans. People in the Netherlands, they just keep getting taller and taller, but Americans are just like staying at one height and even kind of getting shorter. And some of the
And
theories is that
I saw the picture that
Yeah.
the Chinese balloon took of the people in, I forget, I think the state of Missouri, that were, throwing beer bottles up at the.
that's hilarious. Yeah. That is so American.
You should have shot that thing down pages ago.
Well, apparently there was like 3 of them during the
Oh,
Trump
yeah.
presidency or something. So we're only hearing about them now because Biden's doing something,
Well, that's,
perhaps.
he's the president. He doesn't actually run around doing anything.
Well, yeah, but he signs it all.
Where the president has the impact is by hiring the right people to do the right job. And one of the things that Trump did, which was deliberate, was basically try to destroy as many government agencies as possible by not hiring capable people.
Yeah.
And so it is a real philosophical shift to think government's good for us and ought to function properly, or government's bad for us and ought not to function because it just, steals money from
I
people,
don't think
etc.
anarchy works either, though.
Energy?
Anarchy.
Anarchy. I'm not for anarchy myself. I collect Social Security, I collect my military pension. I like those. I don't like the idea of them being removed because I might actually have to really work.
So.
But you weren't finished what you were saying.
About the heights and things?
Oh, I guess you did finish that.
Well,
But even before that, you brought up something. I interrupted.
I don't remember. I have a terrible memory.
It's a squirrel. Squirrels do that to us. Yes.
But the theory is that heights in America are affected by like the corn syrup and all that.
Yeah, I also saw like a thing on the internet where like these researchers were saying that American foods like always make you sick, and people that don't have these kinds of like polysaturated fats and like oils and corn syrup, like they don't get sick. Like people from the UK versus America, like they're so much more healthy.
And like people that live in America that have like certain allergies will go to like European countries and eat those foods and have no reaction to them.
I've definitely heard that, where it's like they don't have like, they have a lot of allergic reactions in the United States because like in Europe they ban a lot of like fillers that the US doesn't have like banned.
Washing the eggs.
And then I mean like
Yeah.
you can see like the difference in the ingredients, they taste like completely different because like the FDA allows certain products in the USA as like in Europe doesn't.
Scary book. Very scary book, because you start reading this and you start realizing I'm an experiment. They have no clue what my ingesting these kinds of products are going to do, etc. There is a last part of the book that he talks about a different kind of farming. There are some farms, that are trying to do all native. Yes.
Yeah,
So.
you can continue. I was just gonna ask if you like the choice.
I watched the first one and enjoyed it, but the Matrix Regurgitated, the second one, it gave me that feeling you get from riding on a roller coaster.
No, I love that feeling.
Okay, that's fine. You're allowed to love that feeling. It's just I don't, because it makes me barf, which is, kind of. In fact, I still remember the one time in Atlantic City, we got off the roller coaster, we got on the Ferris wheel thingy, and I threw up on my date, you know.
No.
And, you know, that's not a good way to have, you know.
Did she ghost you after that?
No, because we were in the same high school. Well, you know,
That probably
next,
made it
next,
more
you know,
awkward.
so
Yeah.
she had to put up with me, you know, until we graduated, at least. Pardon?
Good person in the hobbies.
Did you get another date after?
Not with her.
That doesn't matter, you have a wife of how many years now that you're not?
50, yes.
Yeah. Did you barf in front of her yesterday?
I did not.
You've never barfed in front of your wife?
No, I've barfed, but in the bathroom where, you know, she might hear
That's pretty reasonable.
it. But, you know, that way, yeah,
That's
the folks that I've barfed on were, you know, Mary Ann Leyden, that was on the Ferris wheel, and the other one was coming back from a performance we played, you know, in an ancient music group, and we were sitting in the back seat of Professor Cohen's car, and coming through the smelliest area of Philadelphia, and I was getting sick and sick and sick. I said, we need to pull over, we need to pull over. And he said, well, there's no place to pull over yet, and there really isn't in that area. And finally I just, for some reason, turned to the left, sitting in the, you know, and I threw up in Mary Beth's lap. And she said, why did you turn, you know, I could have just barfed this way, but instead I turned and I barfed on her, which is like, why do you do stuff like that? I don't know. But let's get back to profiling, and to get to, you know, how to change your mind. That's the book that I wanted to mention. That this is a serious look at you know, modern use of various kinds of drugs, psychedelics, and what they teach us about consciousness. So there are folks that are out there studying this. I still do not recommend you using these because you're young and your career may depend on you being legally free of this kind of thing. Yes?
I have a question then. What do you think about the mushroom coffee?
Oh,
You know, yeah, like mud water, and they have other types too, but it's like, it's just like, it's not like psychedelic, but they're like, and then there's like those, instead of Adderall, they're having you take like those pills that have mushrooms in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I
What do you think
mean,
of
like, they're
those?
not
Like-
really like psychedelic, but they do help like
They're
repair.
mushrooms.
I mean, there's a difference between like being on psychedelics and then
Oh,
being
yeah,
like,
but, yeah, but mushrooms.
Well, what?
People eat mushrooms, they just eat mushrooms, they go
Yeah.
forage for mushrooms, they
Yeah.
food.
and I mean, it's
Not
just
regular
really great growth.
mushrooms, I'm talking about like
The
the ones that
psychedelic
you
mushrooms.
microdose on.
That's what I.
Oh, like,
I was confused for a second. I thought we were talking
Yeah.
about the mushrooms in the grocery store. I said,
no, like, and then the mud
You
water
know,
has like all the
as far
other
as,
ones
not
in it.
yet. You
Those
can't
are
buy them in
psychedelic.
Yeah,
the
they're
grocery
like-
store. Should be edible ones,
Lion's mane and things like that.
but and they're good. I like them in
There's a lot of
salads,
different types of
you know,
Yeah.
hamburgers, you know, all those things. But the point of this is that these psychedelic ones create a change in your mental experience. We don't understand it. We don't understand it. And by the way, there can be bad ones. In this book, he tries 3 of the major psychedelic. One mushroom was one, peyote is another, and LSD was another. But he did each of these with a noted individual who has escaped justice, basically, because they're not been arrested, but also are famous for leading people through these various kinds of experiences safely, and that's a really important part. Yes.
I watched like a documentary how like a lot of psychedelics help like trauma induced like things, and also like it helps like diseases or cancerous diseases where it helps like the person itself like get over their fear of like death or like, you know they're gonna die soon. So it's like, it's kind of interesting.
But I feel like it varies on each person.
Yeah.
Because I know on mushrooms, I've never done it, but actually, but I know like mine. Okay, never mind.
I'm not an
But
army
my
recruiter,
brother
so,
has,
you
but I
know.
know you can have like bad trips, and for each person you can have bad and good. It doesn't matter on who is like who the person is. Like each mushroom could be a little different or something, right?
And
But how do
there's
you
other
know?
circumstances, the mood of the setting,
Yes,
etc.
if you go into
all of
it
that
with
can-
a bad mood, you're gonna have a bad
Trip.
trip or something.
Yeah, I recommend reading the book. It was a very, very interesting book.
Yeah.
And Michael Pollan has been out there. His first one was The Botany of Desire, where I learned that lawns are taking advantage of us. Grass is just, you know, manipulating us, and grass is lawn grass.
Yeah, I like that.
Is like covering the earth, you know. You know, it's like taking over, and how is it doing it? You know, my neighbors are in this cult of grass. You know, they want me to have a lawn, and you know, they think that their house value is dependent on how green the grass is, and you should use all these poisons on the lawn and everything.
I'd much rather have moss and clover.
I'm with you on this. And moss is really pretty easy to grow, and you never have to mow it. So I'm a pro moss person. And trees. I'm into trees. We have a sign out on our property that says this is an official natural habitat, you know, because we don't use any of the poisons, et cetera, et cetera. But so, I recommend this book if you get into that. And the reason I bring it up is because, of course, Plotinus is clearly not the first, but in his writing, he gives us a fascinating insight into how you can literally connect with heaven while still alive. And part of it seems to be something to do with meditation. And why is that significant in the Christian era? We'll see that the Christians in the cathedrals and in the music are all going to essentially be trying to figure out how to create an experience where you feel one with the sacred, one with the sacred space. And if you think about the Ambrosian chant, Bishop Ambrose is the one who converts Aurelius Augustine to Christianity. His mother was Christian, Monica was Christian, and wanted him to become Christian, but not until after he had gone through his youth where she knew he was going to sin. So a famous line from St. Augustine is, "God, let me become good, but not yet." He wanted to wait until he had the fun of all the sins, and then get baptized, and all that would be cleaned up, right? And he was all set. You know, that was his thinking. It was very popular. That's still pretty popular to do that way. Okay, so let's talk a little bit though about the history of religion. I started already on that. Well, I'll just what to pull up. There's some fascinating people out there, but there, you know, it would be way more than an hour and 15 minutes to really discuss all of them. I've obviously been fascinated by this. I almost went to seminary after my master's degree, but as you know, I probably, have already said, at the last minute, Donna and I decided to join. I joined the Army, so that we got rich instead of being a poor seminarian and becoming, so
Did you end up getting rich in the military?
Depends on what you mean by it, of course. But let's face it, we've never been starving. See that? And we have all the things, you know. In fact, my daughters are especially furious with us because the house is such a mess because there's so much crap in it. We're at that point where we really have to figure out how to get rid of stuff.
A garage sale.
That doesn't really work. We've tried that, and most people won't buy philosophy books. They're that kind of thing, I
Donate
suppose.
them to the Goodwill.
Well, we've tried giving them to Tidal Wave, and then Tidal Wave is free to give them to whoever they want. But the thing is, as we were talking about, the value of the book, the physical book, as opposed to the e-book and so on, is that when it's sitting on the shelf, I can just look at the book and it's like, boom, I remember what's in that book. Book not there, and I don't remember it. I might remember it, but the thing is, it's much more physically kind of there for that kind of reminder. But if we go back and think about my history and how I was fascinated, I was raised Roman Catholic, so I was raised Christian. I know there's a lot of Christian groups that don't think of Roman Catholics as Christian, and I think that's actually kind of silly, because of course that was the church originally. We'll see that with Augustine. There were lots of Jesus sects, right? That believed different things. And in the Nicene Council, which I think I already pulled that up once, the creed, credo means I believe in Latin. This was like the passwords you needed in order, if you were traveling from one town to another, to convince the group that you met who were Christians that you were also a Christian, because you knew the secret words, etc. Right? But of course, religion goes back farther than that. And if we at least think of the pagans, pagano means the countryside. And so where did the word pagan get applied to the pagan religions? From the Christian era, where the Christians were primarily in the urban centers, the educated centers. That's where it flourished initially. And the countryside turned out to be still following the religions of Rome, basically. Augustine's, he's North Africa, and he's the Bishop of Hippo, grew up in that area, and it was a Roman colony, so it was like the breadbasket of the Roman Empire at the time. So lots of farms, and questions about whether Augustine's family was North African, Roman, what they were, no one really knows. So there are pictures of Augustine painted as a black bishop as opposed to Caucasian, but frankly no one really knows, so that's how that's going to be. By the way, the same thing applies to Jesus. You often see pictures of Jesus depicted as a white European, and that's a very confusing thing. I don't really identify as white myself, if that makes sense. Biologists tell us that there's one race, the human race, and I'm human. And my Geo 30 report said that I'm 1.2% Neanderthal, which is pretty cool. And by the way, theoretically, that's where the lack of